and start. If you can just put your cell phones on silent mode or vibrator, or if you need to talk or anything, just, to be respectful with others and just step a little bit outside. If you can't see, now is the time to move. If anything, we'll be talking about different topics today. Go ahead. Yeah, just let's try to keep on the straight line so everybody can see. Okay, so we're going to be talking about different topics. Hopefully it could be useful. We're going to leave the questions at the end. I'm focusing on general information. Just, some of you might already have some applications ongoing, in process. Some of you are going to start. I'm going to focus on applications meant for permanent residents or those who are going for Canadian citizenship, or those who are already Canadian citizens or permanent residents going into family sponsorship. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. It's a lot to discuss. It's a lot of information. We're just going to give the generals. I can't really go into detail because then we'll be here for a very, very long time. And also because there's a lot of things that could be different or could vary from person to person. Everybody has a different background. Everybody has different situations. Some of you already comply with the requirements. Some of you have a little bit of difficulties complying with them. Or maybe some of you were already denied something, or depends. Everybody's different. Everybody has their applications in a different stage. So we're just gonna give the general. Hopefully that will give you a little bit more of information on what we're gonna be talking about. And just very briefly, we're gonna talk about provincial programs in the end. And that's for, if you feel that some of your family just doesn't fit in anything, maybe a lot of people leave behind the provincial nominee programs. They don't really go into detail about that. So we're going to just talk a little bit about occupations in demand. So, like I said when we started, my name is Mildred. I'm an immigration consultant. I've been working in immigration law for quite a while, over 8 years already. We're an immigration law firm. We're quite far from here. We're like Queen Bay. We're right at the downtown Toronto. So we're just focused on everything regarding immigration except refugees. I stopped taking those cases a while ago. But other than that, we work with everything. And just so that you have an understanding, I also practice for the province of Saskatchewan. Quebec has a different regulation. I don't practice for Quebec. So everything else we do. So starting with permanent resident, if you are a permanent resident already, the thing or some things that you have to keep in mind is make sure that you maintain your PR status. Not because you have your permanent residence means that it's going to be there forever, or that you don't have to continue complying with certain obligations, like the time that you're here. Because it started happening, at least with some clients that we had, that they got their permanent residence and then they left the country for some reason, and then eventually they wanted to come back, and now they can't. Now they have to reapply because they lost their status. They lost their permanent resident status. So to keep it, you must have been in Canada for at least 730 days. Okay, usually you get your permanent residence for 5 years. That doesn't mean that you have to be here all the time, right? But just to keep a good amount of time, if you're traveling a lot, just because you're traveling, just because you're maybe family of other reasons, try to do it less than 6 months during the year. That's quite the thing, Go wherever you have to go. Make sure you come back by the time, just so that you keep your time counting towards citizenship. Once you have your citizenship, you don't have to worry about that time, or if you have to stay somewhere else for a very long period of time, that's not a problem. But when you are just a permanent resident, you still have to worry about being in Canada or being present for a certain amount of time in order to be able to apply for citizenship or renew your permanent residence, because I know there's people that never apply for citizenship just because if they do, they could lose another nationality and they don't want to do that. So they continue, renewing PR. So if you're in that situation, make sure that you are counting your days.
So 6 months.
Well, that's because a lot of people say, start counting 730 days, right? After a period of 6 months out of Canada, it's most likely that your permanent residence is not here. So the officer will start questioning, like, what are you doing? Are you working here? What's happening? There's people that do have time, people that work in construction, people that work in certain areas. They work a specific amount of time here and then they leave, and that's okay. That's how work goes. But if that's not the case, and if you're, staying overseas for very long periods of time, the officer is going to say, what's going on? Do you live here? Do you not? What?
Around 6 months.
Yeah, usually less or about to 6 months shouldn't be a problem. So you could check if you have your PR card. Well, you want to check. There's the card and it shows the expiration date. When were you given the permanent resident? When it expires? So just keep that in mind. The time, if you're traveling, the time still counts, but only in a few cases. If you're working outside of Canada, but you're working for the government or the armed forces, or your spouse or common law is working for the government or armed forces and you have to accompany them, okay? That's the case. Or your kids, if, they're accompanying you, well, they don't really have a say, they're minors, so they have to accompany the parents. But just in those circumstances, okay? So make sure that if that's not your case, keep your days to the limit so that you comply with the 730 days. Now, when you're traveling, and that's also been an issue lately, you have to have a permanent resident card valid, okay? If it's about to expire and you need to travel, make sure that you renew your permanent residence. Don't go out thinking that you can come back, okay? Because the permanent resident card is your travel document to go in and out of Canada, okay? You still need your passport, yeah, but that's the one that you use for Canada. So if it's not valid, you have to, the process is only inside Canada, okay? Once you're out, you can't renew your permanent resident. You're gonna have to call the consulate or embassy and see if they can extend what is called a permanent resident travel document. And believe me, it takes a little bit of time. It's not as fun if you're, going on vacation and you have to stay because your permanent resident card you didn't check and it was expired, and then because even when you're at the airport, they won't let you in the plane, okay? I've had people stuck in South Africa and Colombia just because they just can't, they forgot. So eventually it ends up being quite expensive. Now, everybody must have it to enter Canada. If you don't, make sure you're gonna have to do that. Just call the embassy, call the consulate, and you're gonna have to do that outside of Canada. That travel document to let you in again, it's only done outside. So make sure everything is in order by the time you travel. Now, and that's why if you haven't been in Canada for the specific amount of time, they won't even issue your travel document. You're gonna have a hard time, right? So you want to make sure that within the past 5 years, if it's, because it's already expired, you've had the 730 days. And if not, you have to prove that you're gonna somehow meet the requirement, which is quite hard when you're outside of Canada. Like, how can you prove it? You're traveling, you went for vacation, it's not like you take all your documents with you to try and do that. So it becomes a really hectic process. So make sure that you do it, because to be honest, it's not it takes 16 days and it's $50. to renew your PR card. So it's really not a lengthy process. It's not costly. It really just have to do it. Okay, so it's better to do this than to not have it and then have all those issues. Now, in order to renew your card, they will ask, they will check all your traveling, what have you done, and that you've had the 730 days here in Canada. That's what you need to renew your PR card, okay? So make sure you keep maybe a log if you travel a lot, or you can also check with your passport. It has all the stamps and everything. I know sometimes you think that when you come into the airport, sometimes they don't stamp it, but usually when you board the plane or anything, what they do is they just scan it or pass it. That's all they need, because now passports have a little chip, so sometimes they don't stamp it, but they still know you went out. Okay, so just have to check. So make sure that you submit a complete application. Check the expiry date. If it's already 6 months, like it's only valid for 6 months, and you want to start getting it just in case you have an emergency and you have to travel or whatever happens, make sure you have it on time.
So would we get any kind of intimation from the government that the card is not expired?
That's your obligation.
We have to take care of it.
No more cards, no more letters from the government. That's your obligation. You're the one who has a permanent resident status. You're the one who has to keep it. You're the one who's going to be in trouble to not come back. Okay? So they don't do letters anymore for almost anything. Okay? So at least not in immigration. They're trying to avoid that. And also, if you don't submit a complete application, they're just going to, send it back. That's it. So make sure you have to do a complete application. And it's not that many documents, to be honest. So if you already have more than 730 days, you're already ready, you want to apply for citizenship, and I suggest you do that if you can. I know some of your countries don't allow it, and you're just going to have to continue renewing your PR. So now another thing that I didn't mention is, if you're in Canada and your PR expires, you don't lose any rights, okay? You're still a permanent resident. It's just you can't go outside of the country, okay? So that's more likely if you're gonna be traveling. But also for other documents that you might need, or eventually need to renew anything else, you wanna have that document valid. So we're gonna be discussing the citizenship mostly for adults, 18 or over. I know there's other cases like children, but it will be considered here. So in order to be eligible to apply for citizenship, you do have to be here at least 1,095 days in the 5 years before you apply. So usually, within your first PR card, you should meet the requirement. You could apply for citizenship. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not. You will use what is called the physical presence calculator. You can just go online, Google it, you'll get it there. You can log in all your information. It's part of the documents that you must present for the citizenship application, so you still have to do it. And of course, the other thing is make sure you've paid your taxes, okay? Because they will ask for at least the 3 previous years of taxes, okay? Yes, the 3 taxation years, okay? So you make, because that's one of the obligations. So it doesn't matter what happened, you make sure you're okay with your taxes, and if you haven't paid them, well, go to your account and check that out, because they will ask for those.
If you pay on your own,
Well, you still have to pay tax, right?
No, I mean, like,
Even if you have a business, if you're an employee,
if you do your refund and they say your own.
as long as you have a notice of assessment, it's good.
Maybe not that.
Well, even if you don't have activity, you can present taxes.
Present tax.
Even if you're not earning, you can still present. You just say you're not earning, right?
So these sheets are necessary.
Yeah, for the citizenship, yes. Yeah.
So like in PR, when we are out of Canada because of the work requirement, let's say we are still part of the Canadian organization, and it is being counted in those 730 days. for the citizenship, this 1095
Yeah,
days.
you have to work for a government organization, and then you have to be able to prove that that trip was part of work.
What if it is not the government organization, but it is
No.
still the Canadian organization?
No, I mean, you can leave it for consideration of the officer, but it's not the right exception, okay?
The government would
So-
be like federal or provincial or like any government.
And it doesn't matter as long as it's a government organization, right? So that's the requirement. Now you can still, like I said, you can still count the time spent outside of Canada, but it has to be Canadian Armed Forces, federal public administration, or public service of a province or territory. Okay, so make sure it's that, and if it's not that, it's really up to the officer whether he would take it or not. Chances are they won't. Okay. They'll just ask, well, you just wait a few more days and, until you have them. And if you're living outside of Canada, again, with your spouse, common law, it has to be because they are working due to this type of organizations, okay? So, now, let's start with the requirements of citizenship, and a lot of people worry too much about the language test. There's a lot of people who postpone their citizenship just because they don't want to do the test. But it's honestly really, really basic English. So there's 3 ways of meeting the requirement. Now, if you're over 55, you don't have to, do your English test or provide the language requirement. So there's 3 ways of getting or proving that requirement, and the first one is to take a test. It could be the CELPIP General or the IELTS General, and even though the CELPIP and the IELTS evaluate 4 bands, they do listening, reading, writing, speaking. For the purposes of citizenship, they will only count whatever you got on your speaking and your listening. That's it, okay? They're not going to take into consideration your writing or your reading. So a COB4 is all you need. So it's a very basic English. It's just, in order to communicate basic information, that's pretty much it. Now, if you studied in Canada, either secondary, like high school, or post-secondary, college, university, you name it, you don't really have to do that test. You just provide documents that you already studied in Canada, and you're good to go. And the last one is if you did, there's some training, language training that is provided by government-funded institutions all over the place, like Skills for Change. They provide ESL. So as long as you prove that you've met the requirements to have a level of COB4, that's Canadian Language Benchmark 4, you're good to go. So that's what you need for the test. Now, the other test that you're going to take is a citizenship test, okay? So there will be 20 questions, and you need to get 15 right, okay? You can miss 5. Now, when you apply for citizenship, everything is okay. They will send you the day for your exam, and they will usually send you also this book. It's called Discover Canada, Rights and Responsibilities. But you can also find a lot of information. Just Google it, and you can work on some exercises online. But I do recommend reading the book, before going to take the test. It's only 20 questions, like I said, and it's not that lengthy. So if for any reason you don't pass the test, or you don't show up to the test because there's people that just don't show up, they will reschedule a new one, okay? So you will get a new date within 4 to 8 weeks, okay? Now, if you don't pass the test, you will get a second chance. Okay, I mean, this is the 3rd chance, actually. But this time, it will be a hearing, okay? Because maybe there's people that just can't read properly or can't write properly, so it's easier if they just ask some questions and you answer them. So you will meet an officer, and they will answer, and they will evaluate both your language and the knowledge of the questions. And if, again, you didn't pass the test, then that's it. They will deny your application, and then you have to reapply. So just, prepare better. It's hard not to pass it because they give you a lot of opportunities, but there are cases where they just don't pass. So it's very rare, but I've only seen like 1 case of it, but it happens. just prepare for it. It's not such a big deal. Maybe you get really nervous because that's what happens with a lot of people. It's not a long test. It takes like 30 minutes. So just take your time to read. It's 20 questions and they're multiple choice. So that's pretty much. Now,
do they give any like material also to prepare?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, the book that I just told you, they send you the book, and that's the information that's going to be on the test. Okay. If not, you can also download it online on the CIC website. You can download a PDF, and it's you can have it, read it when you're going to work or anything. So, also, don't miss the appointments. Okay, because citizenship takes a while. It takes around 12 months because it goes into steps. You have to send the application, and then they have to send you a date for the test, and then you have to go take the test, and then the hearing, and then the decision, and then the oath. So within all the time, it takes around 1 year, okay? There's lucky people that get it really quick. There's people that have to wait forever to get the dates. So if you miss the dates, just because you forgot, okay, try to call and say, this happened. Or if you have an emergency and you know you're not gonna make it, you have to send it in writing. Tell them to move the date. If you don't mention anything the first time, they're just gonna reschedule. But if you miss it again, you have 30 days to let them know why it happened. Otherwise, they're just gonna, refuse your application, okay? So make sure that you have the time or make the time to actually go take the test and the hearing as well. So, people that are not eligible for citizenship, even though they do have the dates, would be if you have a criminal record, if you're facing criminal charges inside or outside Canada, if you have been ordered to leave Canada, if you have been refused Canadian citizenship because of misrepresentation. Misrepresentation is taken really serious, so make sure that whatever the information you're providing is the right information, okay? Better say whatever's going on than having them find out, and then that becomes really bad mark, and then you're just gonna have to pretty much either continue with your PR status, or it could be even revoked, right? So, and if you did not meet the terms of your permanent resident, because I know there's a lot of people that want to send the Canadian citizenship application ahead of time. They think, well, if it takes 1 year, what if I send it, I'm still 1,000, but by the time it gets there, I'm gonna be 1,095. No, they count your application when they get it. They might take time to process it, but they're just gonna count the days when they get it. So if their days are not there, they're just gonna refuse it. And then you start losing money, and it's $630. So you might just wanna wait. Or make sure that you have maybe 1,100, okay? Just a little gap ahead, if anything. So if everything works fine, you pass your test, you pass your hearing, then you will go ahead and get the oath date, okay? So the official makes the decision about your case, and if it's approved, you're going to take the oath of citizenship. The ceremony takes place within 3 months after the decision was made, so you don't want to miss it, because again, you're gonna have to wait forever to get a new date. So might as well just go. But if it's really necessary, or you're not here, or you had an emergency, make sure that you at least let them know, or call them, or send it in writing so that they can give you a new date. Okay, so that's for citizenship. Like I said, it's pretty much about the days. Make sure you paid your taxes, make sure you don't have any criminal record or anything hanging, maintain your PR. If you're already able to provide the dates for the citizenship, but your PR is going to expire, I suggest you still renew your PR card, because it just takes 15 days or 16 days. It's $50, so you might as well, right? Because the citizenship is going to take a while. Okay, so we're going to talk very briefly about family sponsorship, because there's a lot of types of sponsorship, and that's a case that I don't really like to discuss public because there are a lot of, things that you can't consider. I don't know you guys, so whenever I have questions, giving out seminars or conferences, they're like, well, what if this happened? Or this is my situation. And then we're missing a lot of things, especially from the sponsor, getting to know if the sponsor meets the requirements, if everything's okay, and then I have to ask you about money, if you're on welfare, if you're not, what's your earning, what's going on. And that's a lot of private information that you don't want to be, just discussing all over the place. So we're gonna go with the generals. If you have any questions, like very specific questions, you might ask me at the end, one-on-one. Like I said, if you already have an application ongoing, I really don't know. It's really hard to answer, in regards to what happened because, I got this letter, or they dismissed my application, or they denied my application. It's really hard for me to know why, because I don't really have the file with me, right? So for the types of sponsorship, nowadays you want to consider a lot of things. One of the things is make sure that your applications are complete, okay? Back in the day, many years ago, what they used to do is you submitted the application, but if for any reason you forgot, I don't know, a criminal record, or you forgot a birth certificate. So let's say we have 10 documents, okay, to provide. So they're checking 1, okay, 1 is there, 2 is there, 3, okay, 3 is not there. Let's send them a letter. And forever takes the letter, and then you have 30 days or 60 days to comply. Okay, then comes back the document. Okay, great. So let's go. Now we have 3, now 4. Oh, no 5. Again. And within all that, they were losing a lot of documents as well, right? Because what they do is they don't leave your documents in there. They just put them again in line and put them again in line. So it did like a backlog of documentation forever, and the processing times were taking very, very long, So what they started doing is, if you don't submit a complete application, it's going to be withdrawn, okay? So the first thing they check, it's complete. And then they start, okay? It's taking usually for dependent children and spouses or common law around 12 months. It could be less, but that's the time they have. So it really matters what you put in. Now, all the forms have changed. All the forms have been updated for most of the applications. If you're not submitting the right forms or the most updated forms, they're also dismissing. Okay, so you want to make sure that everything is complete. So I know when we're talking about sponsorship, it's a lot more stressful because it depends on whether you can bring your family member, or they're here but they don't really know if they can stay or not, or what's going to happen. So you really want to make sure for your own benefit that everything is complete, that everything is in order, so you submit. Because a lot of my clients sometimes get upset with me because they want to do it fast, but fast doesn't mean that it's right. I can do things fast, but you're not meeting the requirement. So sometimes we rather wait a little bit to really fulfill the requirement and then send it. Otherwise, we're just gonna send it and it's going to be dismissed at some point. So we're just wasting money and time, and then you get really frustrated because it's getting sent back. So take that into consideration. Think about it, and also whether you're gonna do it inside Canada, outside Canada. All cases are different, like I said, because people could be here on a temporary status. People could be here because they already lost a refugee case, or they did something, or they're just waiting outside to come. So it could be many things. So a complete application is one thing. Now also make sure you are an eligible sponsor, okay? You really have to check that you meet the requirements as a sponsor, because that's the first thing that, the second thing that they're gonna check. So if you're not meeting the sponsor requirements, nothing's gonna happen, even though you really love your family and you want to reunite, it's just not, it's not there. So like I said, in this type of application, I do suggest that you do have an assessment. Doesn't matter if it's not with me, but at least somebody that's regulated. Have an assessment, make sure that you know what you're gonna be doing, that you are eligible for it, and then eventually, start doing everything. Because what happens with the sponsorship applications is that, especially people like here in Canada, or both the couples here in Canada, when they come is, I lost my case, and then if you lose it, you can go for an appeal and you can go for a lot of things are start to get costly, start to get lost in time. And also, if you made an error or misrepresented yourself, we can't really change the information you put. It's not because you come back and put it, I can change all the information and then, magically start all over. I have to use whatever you said, okay, and kind of trying to make amends. But if it was a really bad one, sometimes we just, we have to work around it and, say that it gets really complicated. And like I said, it's a family member that you want to have with you, right?
I just recently renewed my permanent resident card. It took me 6 months to do it. But what I'm saying is, can I not use the same information I used for that for citizenship?
Pardon, can you use the same information for what?
I used it for permanent resident for citizenship.
No, they're different document checklists. Like the point with family sponsorships are reunification. So the main points of this are to get, either your spouse, your dependent children, or your parents, or your grandparents with you, with the Canadian citizen or the permanent residence. The requirements vary, okay? Everybody has different nationalities, everybody has different backgrounds, everybody has different financial statuses. So yes, the documents, although you might see there's just one list, there could be other lists attached just because of your nationality. And there's also different things that you have to manage just because of your own profile, right? So you have to really take that into consideration. Like we said, we really focus on sending a complete application. There are processing times for dependent children. It usually depends on the nationality, but it's mostly 1 year. And also spouse or common law partner, 12 months, even, it could be inside Canada or outside Canada. Now, the thing here, if you're doing a sponsorship application inside Canada, it's inside Canada. No traveling for the principal applicant, for the spouse that you're sponsoring. You can travel as a permanent resident or Canadian citizen, that's not a problem. But the person who's here remains here until the application is over. No emergencies, everything. If they have an emergency and they have to go out of the country, we have to notify, and the application will be taken out and processed now outside Canada. So you have to make up your mind whether it's going to be outside Canada or inside Canada, okay? It really hurts if you're changing your minds.
Excuse me. So basically, the sponsor is supposed to be inside till the.
Not inside. It's up to you, and this is only for spouse or common law partner.
Let's say, for example, I decided to sponsor my spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Then till she comes, I have to be in Canada.
No, I said for the permanent resident or Canadian citizen, you can travel. That's not a problem. If your spouse is in Canada and you're going to sponsor them, it's called inland sponsorship because they're here in Canada.
They're already here.
Yeah.
That kind of.
Sometimes they're students, sometimes they just came as a tourist. I don't know. Sometimes they're in another process, and they're already here in Canada. That common law has to be here in Canada, right? So if you're going to sponsor them and it's going to be inside Canada, they have to remain inside Canada until the processing is over. Okay. If it's outside Canada, then outside, okay? That's not for the permanent resident or the Canadian citizen. That's for the person you're sponsoring. So the parents and grandparents.
One question. Like if we happen to miss any document, our file will be returned, right?
Yeah.
And do they let us know what document we have missed, or
No,
we have to
they
guess
will
on
send
our?
it back.
Huh?
No, there's a document checklist. this is the thing, and that's why this is how I put it for everybody. Okay, the CAC website or the immigration website has all the information, or almost all the information, kind of the general one, for you to put together if you want to do it yourself. But they're no longer taking into consideration all of that you mentioned. Like, they're gonna tell me, what did I miss? Because that takes forever, that costs a lot of money, and that ends up getting people's application delayed very long. So that's what they stopped doing.
So we won't get to know like what documents.
No, you just say your application wasn't complete. Okay? Yeah. So I mean, it's up to the officer if they want to write a letter and let you know that it something. And usually when they give you back your application, don't expect it to be the same way you put it. Sometimes they just give you back like 3 documents, because once you give it, don't expect those things to come back. So like I said with everybody, I can do my taxes, but I don't know how. I didn't do accounting. I didn't study accounting, so I'm not gonna go do my taxes just because I can see something in there. Just because I don't have the experience and I wouldn't understand it. So like I said, sometimes depending on your case, if it really already has a lot of things that you feel they're not there, or just sometimes have an assessment and at least know. Because clients are very positive, or what you do is you're basing your case on another case that was successful. My friend did that and then they got it in 6 months. Yeah, but your friend has like another story, right? So nothing is never exactly the same, right? Because like I said, a lot of very private and personal information goes into those applications that they're not just gonna tell everybody. So be careful with your own.
But not everybody, like the person who has applied, he should get to know at least what he missed. He would not get to know about this.
It's up to the officer. They write, and like I said, they will tell you it's dismissed because it's not complete. Right? That's
for the spouse common law. I know you said the criteria is different for every case is different. On the CAC website, will it give you some generic? You must.
It gives you the generic.
80,000 per year, 5
No.
year employment.
For the spouse and common law partner, you don't have to have a specific income.
Oh.
It's not there. It's in the law. It's in the act.
Oh.
Okay? See, that's what I mean when you. That's what I mean when you just get the generics. You have to go into the law, and then if you don't have an income, then we have to mention, and we have to bring up the act and say, go to section this and this, and make sure that you read it, and that you don't necessarily need that income, right?
Right.
So it's like I said, they can't put all the information there. You know what I mean?
They look at you, you're a good citizen. You have parking tickets.
Not necessarily. It's more into other type of assistance that they check. If whether they really look into the sponsorship being a real relationship, right? And you really have to support the documents on that. And then there are some documents that we usually include that are not even there, depending on the nationality, because all cases, are look different. There's people that have arranged marriages, so their application is totally different.
Wow.
We have cases where, they're marrying same backgrounds, Latin American people with Latin American, okay, that's fine. But then somebody from Asia is marrying somebody from Mexico, so they're like, what's happening, right? So you just have to check into that. And then there's also specific document checklists for every nationality.
Wow.
Okay, so.
Is this different from the visa?
No, we're talking about spousal sponsorship. Okay, this is spouse and common law sponsorship. Okay.
What about the siblings? Can they sponsor?
No, you cannot sponsor your siblings. You can only sponsor your spouse, your common law, your children, or the children of your spouse or common law, parents or grandparents.
Parents are
That's it.
parent each.
Hold on, let's go for parts because we're just finishing the spouse sponsorship. So, with the spouse or common law sponsorship, like I said, make sure it's a complete application. If you by any chance have anything already going on, or you think that you don't necessarily feel so comfortable because you're not meeting all the requirements, at least have an assessment, and then you'll get the information, and then you decide from there, okay? Just so that if you're gonna submit your application by yourself, then you have a little bit of guidance on it, okay? Now, we're gonna pass on to the next subject, and that's parents and grandparents. We know that the last few draws of the parents and it's not as how we all wanted those to be. There's only a selection, and a few people got selected. It's pretty much like a lottery. You submit your expression of interest, and if you get selected, then you get selected. If not, then you just have to keep on waiting. Now, what they introduced this last time to, again, try to make a better selection, because the previous one was just random. It's just like put your name and how many people you want to sponsor and where you're from, and that's pretty much it. But this last one, you had to submit, or you had to provide at least proof that you meet the funds, okay? With the parents and the grandparents, it's very important to meet the funds. So you have to count yourself, your spouse, your kids, or whoever's living in your household, plus the parents, okay? Or plus the grandparents. Oh, so you have to keep on counting. Now, it could be your parents, and you are providing, or you're sponsoring them because you meet the income requirement for the last 3 years. Or maybe you don't, but your spouse or common law is going to help, so they will be co-signing. So what you will do is that you will combine your income to provide the support for the parents or grandparents, okay? Patience with the parent and grandparent application, it's taking 2 years, okay? It's going well, but it's taking a while. Just why? Because a lot of people ask why. This is the thing. To be honest, for immigration purposes, your parents are, even though you support them, and even though you are going to be supporting them for about 10 years, so they don't ask for welfare or any type of benefit, they still get a health card. They still get benefits, okay? And that costs for everybody. So, what they try to do is push the economic class. That means all the express entry and all the provincial nominee programs for people that are on a certain amount of age that are going to come and contribute and keep working and keep the economy going. Based on that, the amount of parents and grandparents that
these parents are also eligible for pension.
No, if they work. Some parents, some people. I have clients that are very young, or have parents that are very young.
Old.
They're like 40.
Not in working age.
No, you get a pension if you worked, right? You don't get a pension if you don't work. We wish.
Free money.
Just like asking.
And if they get any, you have to pay for it.
Yeah, but
But
the medical would be there.
Old age
Still,
it will be
the medical
Yeah,
would be
the
there.
health-
But still
the health part
they
is
not
there.
work, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
why they're only taking a certain amount, right? Because most of the parents that are coming, or the grandparents, are in an age that they're not going to work anymore. Okay, most of them won't even speak English or French, right? So some of them would do, because, like I said, there's parents that come in their 40s, 50s. They still come, they still work, they still but it's the minimum percentage.
And if
Right.
the parents are already here on super visa or visitor visa, can they apply for this? Can they
Yeah,
apply for
the
this
super visa is only here, and they suggested the super visa just because there's a lot of people that don't get the opportunity to sponsor them. You don't get selected, but you still want your parents to be here. So the super visa was introduced because there was a time where they just pretty much stopped the parent sponsorship. So they gave that option. So pretty much on this super visa, your parents can be here for up to 2 years. The super visa could be for more, but just 2 years continuously.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good choice if your parents don't really want to stay here, or if you're just waiting to be selected for the parent and sponsorship. Of course, you want to be selected because, you know, they have other rights, now they're permanent residents and eventually Canadian
They
citizens.
can come on the super visa and then apply here whenever they arrive.
You can, no, the parent sponsorship, you can only apply when it's available, which is at the beginning of the year. Okay?
So like if during that time they are in Canada
It
and
doesn't matter where they're at. They could be in
Okay.
Canada, they could be in Africa,
So
they
they
could
can
be in
apply.
India, they can apply anywhere they're at because the person applying is you. Okay? You're the one that's going to be assessed. They're only going to be assessed on the medical part and the criminal record part. Okay? As long as they don't have a very bad disease, or I don't know, there may be like if they're not too late.
No, it's okay.
We're standing, but if they're like in a terminal phase of cancer, of course they're not gonna let them in, right?
Right.
But you know, if it's diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that, that's not a problem. As long as it's not a degenerative or transmitted disease or something like really, it has to be something that it's really bad, something that it will really take up the health system, okay? So, super visa is a good way to have them here with you for extended periods of time, but of course, you want to eventually be able to sponsor.
This time frame for Canadian citizen and permanent residents, right? The time frame, the 12 months and 24 months.
No. What, citizenship we left a long time ago.
No, I
This
meant
is a
if you
sponsorship.
want to sponsor, like whoever want to sponsor, it's the same time frame for
No,
Canadian citizens.
parents
or
and
permanent
grandparents takes 24 months.
residents. Yes, but do I have to be a citizen to sponsor my parents, or I can sponsor them if I'm a permanent
Oh
resident?
yes, permanent residents
That's what I'm
and Canadian citizens
Okay.
can sponsor parents.
Same time frame.
As long as you meet the financial requirements.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay?
and how long does the super visa takes?
No, the super visa is taking like a tourist visa, so it really depends on which nationality. You just check the processing time according to your nationality.
Okay, there's
So
no
it
fixed.
doesn't take really long time,
Okay.
maybe like a month. Countries where they take forever, maybe 3 months, but that's the latest, right? With the super visa, what you have to worry about most is meeting the requirement of the insurance. Mm-hmm. It's like up to $5,000. That's what.
A year?
costs. Yeah. So you have to check on. In the super visa, the most important part is insurance. Okay.
The travel insurance, what insurance?
It's a special insurance for the parents because they're gonna be here for like longer periods of time.
Oh, okay.
So it's a specific one, just in
Like
case.
liability.
Yeah. So in case anything, they can be sent back to the country, or it's more for medical purposes. You know,
But
because they're
super
in a
visa
certain
can
age.
use for anybody or only for
Huh?
parents? The super visa can be
Parents
used-
and grandparents only.
only parents and
Yeah.
grandparents, no any.
Brothers not allowed.
Brothers, unfortunately, are not in anything unless your brother has no family and you have no other family other than like you only have you and him or you and her. You know, that's it.
Like if we are successful in like sponsoring our parents, right, and we have us like our brother or sister is alone in India.
No. Alone, like I mean, like alone. Like you guys are the only people in the world left for your family. Like everybody died. You just have your brother, and he just has you.
Okay,
That's it.
then it is possible.
Yeah. Or unless, you know, if you want to go for humanitarian and compassionate grounds, if by any means they really need to be with you. Okay? But remember that in those cases, usually parents can still, you know, put them in the application just because they're dependents of parents, right? So, but it has to be one of those cases.
So
So-
permanent resident can also apply for super visa, right? Not necessarily you should be the citizen.
No, for sponsorship, for super visa, this is the thing. Permanent residents, the only difference between a Canadian citizen is that you still don't have a passport, you cannot vote, and you cannot run for public positions or public office. That's the only three things you can't do. Other than that, you have all the rights. Okay?
You can.
Yeah, so you can sponsor, you can bring your parents.
Can I ask a quick question about the sponsorship one more thing before you go?
Uh-huh.
I know the pros of it, but the cons, suppose you do follow through the spousal common relationship,
Mhm.
you marry, 1 year later is divorce. Is it true, because we're on the street, that you're responsible for that partner for 5 or 10 years? And if that
5.
person decides to go on social assistance and
Yeah, unfortunately.
is
It's at 3 years. It's stopped. It's a
I
little
know
bit
it's
less.
7, then I hear 10,
No, but you are still responsible.
3
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Super visa. 10 years validity.
Yes. No, the super visa
Multiple.
could be valid for up to 10 years, but they can only be here for periods up to 2 years. Okay? And then they go out and then they come back and another 2
They
years.
can't stay 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years straight. Because with a regular tourist visa, you can only you can stay 6 months and then you have to extend, and so in order to avoid that.
Yeah, is it also
Multiple.
sorry?
Also, and multiple, super visa multiple. They can leave Canada and come back.
Yeah, it depends on. So when you're going to apply for a super visa, make sure that the passport has, really long.
Oh,
Because if the passport is only valid for like 3 years, they will only give it for 3 years.
Oh.
Yeah, is it also possible, for example, if I have invited my parents on super visa, right, and the super visa tenure is going to like expire in next month or next week, right? Do they have to go back to the country of origin, for in my case if it is India, or like somebody told me that they can go to US and again come
No,
back. So
no.
is that
Don't go
real?
to US because US is rejecting everybody. You can only apply in US if you're a student or you have a work permit. Okay, it's like in Canada. If you're not, if you don't have that status, you can't really. Okay, so no, you can switch and extend to be a regular tourist if you want, but
Okay, that is possible.
yeah, but just for
But for few days.
yeah, just for a
Can he
few months.
extend it on Canada or he should?
Yeah, but it will change the
Canadian.
status. It's another type of application, right? It's not a super visa. It changes the
So
status.
like if it is not US, if they go to some other country, like some again nearby country.
No, they're tourists
They're-
there.
they're
So
tourists
you cannot apply in another country that it's not your residence,
Okay, so we have to go back to our
Exactly.
country of residence. Okay, got it.
right? And I don't know if back then they did biometrics. They did.
Sorry?
Back then they did biometrics.
Biometrics.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Biometrics is they don't know what
Like,
biometrics.
Yeah, that I know, like, what are you asking about biometrics?
I said they actually did because.
That I don't know, like, if they went through biometrics or not.
Oh, okay. Because usually that's why you
I'm
have to
just
go
asking,
back.
like, because I have to yet to invite my parents from.
Oh, okay. They will usually ask for it. Okay, so because it's a lot of information, you can go into the website and you can read on that specifically here, the elimination of the conditional permanent residence. So you can read what's happening with that. And then there's more information on the website specifically for those things, and you can also check the super visa. So if you go to our website, then you can read more deeply into those subjects.
Thank you for your
Okay, so last, if by any chance you just can't manage to get your family by any means in any application, because I know a lot of people focus on express entry, and express entry, well, you know how the points work, and points are getting high. A lot of people meet the minimum requirements for express entry or for the specific programs like Federal Skilled Worker, Canadian Experience, and those. But meeting the eligibility requirements for the specific ones are not just, that's not it. You have to be actually competitive with the points that the express entry has. So we're currently within 438 up to 470. So it's a great range. And if your family members are over 35, okay, start looking into provincial nominee programs, because the express entry is really, they really take into consideration age. Okay, so I know a lot of people want to come to Ontario, a lot of people want to go to British Columbia, but Ontario and British Columbia are already, they already have enough immigrants, and they're not as open as other provinces like Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Nova Scotia, for example. So look into those, because there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of opportunities there. We have occupations in demand, especially for Saskatchewan. So there's a lot of people that also meet the requirements because the levels of English are lower, so it's better. There's a lot of people that already have very good experience in those areas. So if you want to read about it, again, go to our immigration news section, and then you can be checking. This list changes it does, but these are the occupations in demand that you can apply for now. So there's accounting, architects, people that are working in many things like psychology, baking. So take a look into that program. This is for Saskatchewan specifically. There is one for, this one's open throughout the year. The difference with Nova Scotia is that it's not open throughout the year. It opens like only once or twice a year. And it has every time they want. Yeah, exactly. And but the thing with Nova Scotia, you have to have everything ready because they're only gonna say you can submit your application Monday. And there's like 30, like last time it was like 10 minutes, right? And there goes all the applications. So you have to have them ready. Yeah.
They only open it for 10 minutes?
Well, spots go very quickly. That's what happened with the parents. You try to submit the application and everything goes in like 10 minutes and it's gone.
You have to sit on the website and wait for it to say, okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, but you have to already have everything, the application ready to submit, right? So for those, it is, they're looking for more into financial, accounting, administrative assistance. So it's also on the website. You can check that out. And then Manitoba is focusing mostly on students. So if any family members are coming to study, take a look into the programs that Manitoba has. It has a lot of opportunities for the students. And then they have, either they can apply for a provincial nominee program or they can apply for the express entry, but it opens a lot more opportunities, especially for people that are over, 35, 38, coming with a family. Better to go to those provinces than here, because here they have to wait for the express entry, or maybe if they get selected by an Ontario PNP, which could happen, which could not, because they decide. So for families that are doing that type of investment, it's better to start, rerouting to a place where they can actually be more stable. And eventually, if they want to, move, that can happen. But if, you want to make a priority becoming a permanent resident first, then have an assessment and make sure that you do qualify in for which program, right? Because it happens a lot. So there's more information there on the Atlantic Pilot Program, the programs for Manitoba, what you should get in your IELTS, your CELPIP, more about Saskatchewan, who can represent you. So those are all articles for the website. And this is our information. That's our website, LinkedIn, Facebook, our email if you have any other questions. That's our office. Don't just show up, you just go by appointment. Because a lot of people show up and they're like, well, we can't really take you in right now. Let's book an appointment. So